with three of the most amazing authors we have in New Zealand. Speaking about women going wild in this environment is rather interesting. I'm very aware of this hall of founding fathers looking down on us with some very patriarchal gazes indeed. So do let me know if you see any of them reacting strangely to anything that they hear in the hall today. So we thought we might open our session with a brief reading from each of us. And Irene Beautray is going to open for us. So Irene Beautray, that I'm sure is a name that you will all be aware of. Irene lives in Wanganui. She's the author of 4 amazing collections of poetry and a collection of short fiction, Bug Week. In 2021, Bug Week won the Jan Medlicott Acorn Foundation Prize at the Ockham New Zealand Book Awards. So, to take us away, here is Irene.
Thanks Tracy. Kia ora koutou. Thanks everybody for coming along. So, when I got invited to be in this panel, I thought, well, there's not a lot of good sex in Bug Week, so if you're looking for that, you won't find it, unfortunately. But I found some bad sex, so I'll just read some of that. So this is from a story called Billy the Pirate Poet, and it's about, I guess, people living in Wellington, sort of student age, and Billy is a kind of a hippie British traveller, and he's met these girls, and this is a scene where the one who isn't his girlfriend has helped him move a bed into his flat, and that this happens. "There," said Billy, as we finally lowered the mattress into place. It was floppy and had that op-shop aroma of feet and stale lavender perfume. I helped him tie a piece of patterned muslin onto the posts. Then, although it was starting to feel overly intimate, we found some communal sheets in the hot water cupboard and made the bed up. We hung someone's embroidered tablecloth over the Cupid. He's creepy, we agreed. "Now," said Billy, "I just need to know if it's all right with 2 people on it." I lay next to him. "I got a new tattoo on the weekend," he said, and took off his shirt. It was an appropriated Māori pattern around his upper arm. I went up to Taupo to go skydiving, and I thought, I want to mark this occasion with some ink. "You have a lot of tattoos." I thought it would be polite to remove an item of my own clothing, but I wasn't sure what. He had a couple of swallows on his chest, some Chinese characters on his belly. Down his spine swooped a dragon, the kind that breathes fire and eats princesses. The pirate fantasy must have been sparked by the anchor on his bicep. "That was my first," he said. I went into the shop and said, "What's the cheesiest thing I can get?" "It'd be that or a heart with your mother's name." "Yeah, and we don't get on, unfortunately." We were both lying on our backs. He humped the air a few times, made the mattress buck. "What do you reckon? It passed the test?" "I guess so," I said. "It would depend how much exercise you gave it." "Good." Billy sat up. I asked him to tell me some more about skydiving, which he did, and then, in a way that made it seem purely accidental, he reached for his cigarettes on the bedside table, fell on me, and did he kiss me? Or did I kiss him? I recall he tasted of Port Royal tobacco. His skin smelled of tea tree. For a man purportedly so good with his hands, he was surprisingly imprecise. The sky began to darken. Birds were sounding out their roosting calls. Billy moved like a battering ram. After what seemed like hours, and probably was, he leaned on his elbow and said, "Do you think you might come soon?" I laughed. I felt bruised. "No," I admitted. "Neither." Billy rolled onto his stomach. "Do you mind if I stop then?" "Not at all." Perhaps I would cry. "It's not your fault," he said. "It's the pills." I must have frowned. "Antidepressants. Nothing exciting," he explained. "If I don't take them, I just can't even get up in the morning, but it takes me about 3 days to reach orgasm." "Oh, Everything was starting to fit together. Yeah, I have severe depression. It's why I can't keep a steady job. I just do odd stuff until I've saved enough money to go to, well, you know, wherever the dart falls on the map, so to speak. You need to sell some poems. For the first time, but not the last, I felt genuinely sorry for Billy. Thank you.
Fiona, do you feel like the next spot? Okay.
Oh, kia ora tātou, yes. Well, I feel a little in the company that I'm keeping, this excellent company that I'm keeping, I feel a little bit like the grandmother of New Zealand sex. I didn't expect it when in my early life at any stage to be sitting here having sex in the afternoon. But it has been suggested to me by one of our organisers that sex in the afternoon is called delight in the afternoon. So here we are, delightfully in the afternoon, and I'm going to subvert the process just very slightly by reading something by somebody else. Not because I can't read my own, but this is in the book that I've recently published called So Far For Now. I talk about writing memoir and how my writing groups go, and how some of the poems that I ask people to read aloud during that. And one of them is a poem by the American writer Sharon Olds, and it's called Making Love. And it's a poem that I absolutely love, and so I'm going to read that to you instead. Is that okay? Yeah. Making love. You can't ever remember it, really. You wake up and you do not know where you are or who you are or what you are. The last light of the evening is coming up to the windows, not coming in, and it is more like a cold mist than light, greenish, standing there in the deep frames, the bedpost a dark knob, not gleaming, the heavy, heavy body of the desk between two windows. Solid maple with its curled, resinous bird's eye shining inside the wood. And you try to think back. You cannot remember it. It stands in the back of your mind like a mountain at night, behind you, enormous, or a field of snow at night. Your pants are torn or across the room, or still dangling from one leg like a heavy scarlet loop of the body. Your bra is half on or not, or you were naked to begin with. You cannot remember. All you know is you feel absolute and everything has changed. Tomorrow, maybe taking a kid to school, your foot half off the curb in the air, you'll see his mouth where it was and feel it and the large double star of your two bodies. But for now, you are like the one in the crib. You are everyone right now. The three milky greenish windows like sentinels there saying, don't worry, you will not remember, you will never know.
Okay, Fiona was so keen to get to the sex writing that we didn't give her proper introduction there. So I'm sure she needs no introduction to you all. But Dame Fiona Kidman, DNZM, OBE, writes novels, short stories, memoir and poetry. Her most recent novel, This Mortal Boy, won the 2019 Ockham New Zealand Book Awards, Acorn Foundation Fiction Prize, and a wonderful collection of her essays So Far For Now has been released and is waiting for you to buy it out on the bookshelves. So now we have Rebecca K. Riley. Rebecca Ngāti Hine Ngāti Wai is an Auckland novelist. She won the 2019 Adam Foundation Prize, and her wonderful novel Greta and Valden was shortlisted for the 2022 Ockham New Zealand Book Awards. Take it away, Rebecca.
Greta and Valden doesn't have any sex scenes in it, and I've never written one, but it has, much like my own life, it has moderate sexual references in it. So, after dinner at the lodge we're staying in, I sneak out of the big wood-panelled dining room. I can hear laughter echoing down the hall and footsteps on the terracotta tiles. Plates are being cleared and more beer is being collected from the cellar. I can hear people talking about me, but in a good way, not in a we need to talk about V way. I lean against the wall and put my phone up to my ear. Hello? Hey. Hi. It's Valden. Vladisavljevic. Oh, that Valden, not the one I met the other night. He was really cute. Taller than you, perfectly fluent in Spanish, tiny little nose, chubby. How are you? I'm good, how are you? I put my foot up against the wall like I'm a cowboy, like I'm the midnight cowboy. I notice a framed picture of the Queen of the Netherlands on the wall opposite me. I'm not too bad. I want to see you, I say, as one of the main culprits who drank all the beer at dinner. That's interesting, he says. Why is he being coy with me? I feel like my neck is getting red, and I put my hand on it in case anyone walks past on their way to the toilet and sees right through me. I can hear Sharby walking around, and I wonder what he's doing, what he's wearing. What are you wearing, I ask. He laughs. What am I wearing? Val, you're making me blush. I melt a bit when he says my name. Tell me what you're wearing, though. A woman carrying a tray of plates walks past me and smiles to herself. My neck is definitely red now. I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt. What are you wearing? I look down. Well, I'm also wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He laughs again. I guess these jeans are quite tight, if that helps. I don't know what you're trying to achieve here. In what way are they tight? Around the thighs? You know I have big thighs. I do. I remember having seen them, having maybe gripped them at times. Where are you? On the bed? I've been there. Do you remember? Of course I remember, he says softly. Do you remember what I said? Harder? I turn around quickly and press my forehead into the wall. I forgot I said that. I meant when I said that I loved you. He laughs. Laughing is not the reaction I wanted. That was pretty nice. That was pretty nice. I can't give myself up too easily to you. It would be like in that movie you like. What's it called? I like probably 10,000 movies, I mutter to the wall. Twins, Junior, Kindergarten Cop, Hercules in New York. Earth girls are easy. I don't want you to think you can get whatever you want from me just because you've crash-landed into my life again. I feel embarrassed. I don't think I can have whatever I want. I never have. I'm sorry. I don't want to disrupt your life. I want to see you too. You do? Yeah, I was messing with you. I thought you wanted to have phone sex, but now I'm not so sure. Where are you? Oh, I was having dinner with everyone from work, and now I'm standing in the corridor by the kitchen. Oh, so just in public then. My friend who's the production manager said she could change my schedule around so I don't have to fly back for 2 weeks. Do you want me to come and see you? Or do you think that would make things unnecessarily complicated? I'm not going to be here. I'm flying to Medellin this weekend. Oh, I feel embarrassed again and not sure what I was really trying to achieve. Do you want to come to Colombia, or is that too intense? You wouldn't have to do anything. You could just hang out and do your own thing while I'm tied up. I'm nervous and I'd really like it if you were with me, but I know it's a very awkward position to put you in before Emma walks past holding a beer bottle that's dripping with condensation. She waves her free hand around, which I understand to mean she's getting a paper towel and that I should come back to the table because we've got more beer now. I'll come with you. Are you sure? Yeah, I'll book the flights tonight. Do you want me to call you when I'm alone? I'd like that. Hey, don't worry if you change your mind, I'll understand. I won't. I'll talk to you later. I look at the drips of water across the tiles and breathe in and out a few times to transition from local lovesick pansy to fun media personality. I follow the drips inside and try to think of a good joke about Uruguay.
Brilliant, thank you. And lastly, I realise I didn't introduce myself yet. So I'm Tracy Slaughter. I also write. I've been giving my heart and soul and nerve endings to it for quite some years now. This is my latest book. And I'm just going to read a short piece from a story called 11 Love Stories You Paint Blue. This is the opening where a lightning bolt of desire or fantasy strikes in a very ordinary place on the way to pick up the kids from school. Waist deep, only your lower half in love with him those early days. Only your knees loose and hazy with warmth when you see him, and up in the core, in the muscle, the laze of his far-off hello smile leaves an easy thrum. But he's at a distance, safe, with fields and roads and rooms still yet to cross, cars to dance through at laid-back 3 p.m. speed. You're okay, in the presence of others, the press. What could you do? So you're just in love low along the autumn length of your legs under a thoughtless dress, a weightless old dress between breath and cloth, wearing a drizzle of long ago flowers on blue, the kind of blossoms history is made of, petals adrift in sweet vintage ticks. Your drifty legs, with the slope of love ending in sandals full of schoolyard dusk, that get you to curbs, that get you to corners, the road patrol kids with their wide signs slowing and halting you, that get you to a vista of trees arched low with the park cool under them in long clay ribs, your ankles aimless and soaked in leaves and shade, the falling of edges and yesterdays that old trees always speak. There's the sound of his shoes on their shovel through leaves, off time with your longing, and your blink through fresh-washed fringe, and your too loud scuff. Hello. Oh. Hi. Yeah, hi again. Half wordless, still paces apart. And only your lower half cut across the dark grass, doped at the soles and lonely to the thighs, just getting to the place you have to go to pick up his kid, your kid, but in the hip line, want is making you tense and sway with a non-committal rock. Just a hemisphere of muscles and love you can't be held accountable for. Keep 8 paces, keep 5, even 3 between you, an easy border in the dry blonde leaves, and nothing bad will come. So you can't stop wanting a skinful of his fingers, so you want to hold him lodged, locked at shoulder, knucklebone, cock. So what? So what? So, here we are. I'm going to start by saying that I often feel shocked when I get a lot of comments on the perceived wildness or fearlessness, shamelessness of the sexual content in my work, because I don't really see it as graphic or groundbreaking. When I'm writing, I simply see it as my job to really face and express the full range of embodied experience, and I don't consciously see exploring sex as really separate to any other human facet. So I'm wondering how you react to your work getting categorised as bold or wild in terms of its portrayal of sex and sexuality. Is it a surprise to find yourself in that category? We were introduced on the program as clit lit, which is an interesting phrase. But I often think if somebody's picking up my book looking for clit, they're going to have to get through a whole lot of lit before they reach it. So yeah, does it come as a surprise that here you are on a panel?
Yes. I mean, where to start? I mean, when I get invited to a festival, I'm like, please don't make me talk about how it's really hard being Māori or how it's really hard being queer, because it's exhausting and like taxing. And then sometimes you're like, oh, we're going to put you on a panel about clit lit. And I'm like, oh, but my book's about 2 gay men. And they're cis. So yeah, I mean, I've had like a few comments about the like sex scenes in my book, and I've been like, oh, thank you, but there aren't any. But you can't say that because it's rude. And then I was talking to Kirsten McDougall about it, and she was like, I think I've just made some of them up. So I don't know what I've done that I've kind of created this book where people have like, found pause to imagine the characters having sex with each other. Yes.
I love it. A kind of anticipatory writing. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Fiona.
Yes, well, I've been writing for a long time now, and my first novel was published in 1979, and it was not I'd written some other books before the novel. So I guess my experiences are of an earlier time. I did write, and I guess my writing has changed either. Also, I mean, it's inevitable, I think, that over a long writing career, something will change. Age does change some of these things that we're writing about. But in 1979, my novel, A Breed of Women, was considered very out there, and I got into a great deal of trouble about it. It was quite graphic about sex, and like Tracy, I didn't really see it as being shocking for the sake of being shocking. I saw it as an exploration of women's lives in the 1970s, and myself as part of a group of women who are going through a time of quite profound change. So sex came into that. When the book came out, there was an absolute uproar over it. It sold extremely well. It sold 9,000 copies in hardback in the first week, and 35,000 in the next month or so. They had to do some very rapid reprints. However, I found myself in a position of having to defend myself at a very personal level, and I found that my family were in a very difficult position. You know, people would come up to my husband, assuming that everything in the book was about me, and they'd say things to him like, well, you know, who's she having it off with now, old chap? And, you know, because the woman at the centre of the book had a bit of an alcohol problem, has a drinking problem, you know, and you know, it was all perceived to be exactly about me. And I found that very difficult and very hard, and I mean, I had other things said about it, like the male reviewers writing things like, the thinking women's Mills and Boon. And nothing, you know, for those who read Mills and Boon, there's some very good books and reading amongst them, but it was typecasting me into some sort of position because I had written about men and women's lives, about women not just having sex, but the most damning thing, I think, in their view was that the women in my book enjoyed sex. And that was a real problem. And it was very hard. And I went into retreat, really, for about a year. But I decided that there were two options open to me. One was to stop writing, or the other one was to simply start writing again, to write another book. And that's what I did. And in time, I think my work came to be seen as more mainstream. The book was banned from some libraries. It was banned from school libraries. It was banned from the school library where my husband taught. And so those things were very difficult. But you know, I look back now and I think, gosh, that was a bit tame, wasn't it? So things change, yeah.
And can I just pause here and say a profound thank you to all the women writers that have come after, because if you had not made that decision to face down that kind of, you know, reaction and keep on writing, it wouldn't have, you know, we wouldn't have felt that we had the permission, you know, to write about the things that we do. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
What about you, Irene?
Oh, that's such an amazing story. Yeah, I think we forget how much things have changed. So for me, I don't really think about my own work as being particularly out of the ordinary sexual. I guess I feel like all of us are just being honest in what we choose to write about. You know, it's not a deliberate ploy to get clit in there. It's just you know what is happening in the worlds that we're exploring through fiction. For me, I think a way more dominant thread in Bug Week is actually trauma, and a lot of that is sexual trauma. So there's kind of an uncomfortable crossover there, but I guess that it's good to be open that that is part of human sexual experience. That, you know, sometimes it's intimacy and love and connection, and sometimes it's actually violence. So I guess it's like across the spectrum, from the best of human behaviour to the absolute worst. Yeah.
Yeah, I can really relate to that too, because I feel, you know, I get so many comments on how many hotels there are in Devil's Trumpet, but there are just as many hospitals. There are a whole other range of experiences which befall the human body in this book, and so many of those circumstances I find so much more shocking than just the good old-fashioned consensual sex that's happening, you know, in hallways, and yet it's female desire that keeps going on, getting the attention. And like you, Fiona, I've had people confront my husband of the time in the street saying, "Did your wife really?" blah, 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 blah. So there is that really unfortunate equation of everything that exists in your book being autobiographically traced back to you. Yeah, it's a hard one to balance. But in some ways, thinking through this topic, I thought maybe I was fated to write about sex because I didn't exactly have a diet of the classics growing up. There weren't a lot of great works of literature on my bookshelf, and I read voraciously. And so far too early, I ended up rummaging around on my mum's bookshelves, where all sorts of dirty bits, on a spectrum from bodice rippers to Hollywood softcore like Jackie Collins, literally fell open to their well-thumbed pages. So I wonder if you have any recollections of early encounters with sex in print, and any favourite naughty books you might still feel a fondness for. And or any contemporary authors who write sex that you find really appealing.
I don't think I read a lot of like particularly sexy books. I think as a kid, well, I got a strong memory of like learning the facts of life from one of those books. I think it was the one with the colourful illustrations that was just happened to be in the classroom bookshelf, and all the older kids were coming into the classroom and pointing at the pictures and laughing. I was like, oh, I better check this book out. So that was how I learned the mechanics of sex, I guess, which is weird because like my parents are science teachers, so. And then I think as children, or children and adolescents, there's that real joy of like finding a sexy book and sharing it. And I think in the 90s when I was growing up, there was more sexual exploration coming into adolescent or young adult fiction. I think it was a John Marsden book that everyone was like passing around the room because there was a scene where. It's about this as a coming of age story of this young man. There's a scene where he's fingering his girlfriend, and then there was this line that was like, I loved it all, especially the soft, moist noises, and the kids were like just losing it over that line. It's like, it's so bad, that's so disgusting. And then another author was Cheryl Jordan, who's a New Zealand children's writer, and I just loved Cheryl Jordan, but I think. Yeah, probably those stories. They were quite romantic. I think it was Winter of Fire. There's a fair bit of sex in Winter of Fire, and I think I probably read that book quite a few times. So I guess it's good to have grown up in a time where that kind of stuff wasn't banned, and it was kind of a safe way to explore, I guess, sensitively written stuff. Yeah.
Well, the first really sexy book, I suppose, that I encountered was, in the fourth form, I was really desperate to know more about what it was. and the head boy at the time was passing around Mickey Spillane, which is hardly an ideal way to learn about the mechanics of sex. They're pretty unpleasant books. In fact, they appear as they did in real life in my novel, This Mortal Boy, in which the protagonist in the boy who was killed in the book has modelled himself as a Mickey Spillane character. They're very violent American crime novels, but I did wheedle out either jury from my head boy friend, my friend who was the head boy, shall I say, and I got some inklings of what sex might be about, but not very good ones. It was a little later when I was a young librarian at the Rotorua Public Library, and I was put in charge of the banned books section. The banned books were on a mezzanine floor, and they were reached by a ladder. Now you must understand that in the 1950s, under Sid Holland's government, there was book burning in this country. It was alive and well, and if the police found banned books, they burned them. So this was quite a serious job I had. So I discovered amongst this, and I can't remember the author, but I know the title was Ideal Marriage, which was about how to be chaste and virtuous until certain things happened. And I got a reasonable idea of what a penis might be like. You must understand that I was an only child and I hadn't had the opportunity to explore what my siblings might look like and so forth. So I was pretty innocent about things, but then somewhere along the way I had a sexual experience that made me think that I probably needed to know if it had happened, which sounds awful, but this was the 1950s. Yeah, so those were the early books. I remember my father having a book called Sorrel and Son by an author called Warwick Deeping, and I wanted to look at it. I was quite a forward reader, and he said, "Oh, you can't read that. It's got dirty stuff in it." I didn't realise I had it in the house. You can't read that. So there was a lot of sort of unpleasant mystery about the books that I was reading when I was a younger person, which seems a bit sad looking back. And I think it's a really good thing that we have much more open writing about sex now. That sort of atmosphere is slightly, it's not right. It's something that you don't talk about. It's kind of a grubby secret. I like that has gone. So you're asking, just to answer your question about are there any writers that I particularly like who write about sex. And what I'd like to just say is that one of my very favourite writers in the world over the years has been the writer Alice Munro. And she doesn't write, thrust and bust sort of writing. She actually writes sideways. She writes about sensuality, in which you can understand that sex is taking place. And I'm really interested, particularly as I get older, in writing about sex in that way, in which we understand sex through the senses, really. And the imagination is opened out to imagine sex for ourselves. I would say, if I may, that I think, and disagree with me if you wish, but I think in order to write about sex, you probably have to have experienced it. I think it's one of those human activities that would be extremely difficult to imagine had you not experienced it.
I'm not quite sure where to go from there. I can recall quite some years ago laughing at the writer Barbara Kingsolver and her confession that, like many authors, she originally tended to deal with sex by using the space bar on her keyboard and frantically banging blanks into the page, rather than actually confronting the sexual activities of her characters. And she wrote an article about really having to struggle to cure herself of those deep-rooted taboos, so to speak. And I'm wondering if you ever had moments where you really had to battle inhibitions or a sense of imposed boundaries when facing this kind of material on the page, or does it, so to speak, just happen naturally?
I only have an answer to the previous question. I was just going to say that definitely no kind of sexy books fell open in my house because my mum was almost exclusively a fan of the work of Terry Pratchett, which I'm not interested in at all. But when I was in year 8, I was in this play called Man of Steel, which was a non-copyright Superman play at school, and someone had Clan of the Cave Bear. And so between all of our scenes, all of us people who, well, this is a side story, I had like a major part in the play and then I kept laughing when I was supposed to be saying my lines, so then I got demoted to old woman with bag. So I had a lot of off time to look at Clan of the Cave Bear, and everyone was reading bits out and laughing, but there was one bit where it said, he put his hand in her and felt out her small hard nodule. And everyone was like, what's that? Had not been in the Dolly Sealed section at all. It's my memory of that. But I don't think that I've like had a problem with myself like not wanting to like write something down. But I will say that I wrote this book in an MA workshop. So sometimes I was like, well, I'm not going to write that and have to deal with 10, 11 people's feedback. But I don't know, it might be like different now that I'm like writing alone.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I don't really think about it. I think I just write what comes into my head. I think it's really important when you're writing or making any creative work, just to be able to turn off. Like it's impossible to do it if you can't turn off that voice in your mind that's like, what are people going to think? Or what will a reader think of this? Or how will an audience find this? Like to be able to create, you just have to shut that off. And I really enjoy getting to the state of mind where all of that is gone and it's just whatever I want to work with. And you can come back to it later, you can come back to something later and go, okay, that's a bit extreme, or that doesn't work, or that doesn't hit the mark, or you can give something to a reader, like with your MA workshop, or I was really lucky. I had friends read my stories before they were published, and some of the reactions weren't positive, so that was really helpful. So I think that's that's probably a good process, at least for me, is to just not worry about it, get it down there, and then come back to it later, and that's when you do the edits, or thinking about what any reception might be.
Great, thank you.
Shall I answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, well, I tend to write sideways. I mean, my characters, when I'm writing fiction, it tends to flow. I go into states of every day I write, and sex doesn't happen unless it needs to in the flow of the story. But when I'm thinking about how to write it, I think I try to move sideways to some extent through sensory perception. So the scent, touch, sound, sight, taste. Those are the sensory perceptions. And I've just jotted down a couple of things here. I say I've got what have I written here? The taste. You might think of the taste of the beloved skin, I suppose. But what else might you think of? You might think about the food that was eaten before the act occurred, or the glass of wine drunk. What kind of wine was it? Where did it come from? The sight. You might, maybe I won't just say that right now. Touch, the touch of skin. You might think about the lovely touch of skin of a beloved person between the characters. But what about the lovely, cool, crisp feel of the sheets, the scent of sex, which is carried around like in the Sharon Olds poem, where she's carrying it around that whole sentence, memory of the sex. But there's also in that there's a whole lot of sensory sight and sound that's involved in it. The fabric, the clothing worn, and I've written down, so it might be the scent of the grass where the act occurred, or I grew up in citrus country, and so when I smell citrus, can be transported to my parents' bedroom. I've written down here, sounds. There are the sounds that go with sex. But what of the music? What are the words of love? All of those things, I think, it's a kind of sideways going. It's not just the act itself. It's what surrounds it. It's what makes it. And I guess I'm writing mostly about sex which is pleasurable. I don't write about violent sex because it's not something that I've really, for the most part, experienced, and it's not something that I really want to give to my characters. So I suppose, again, it's that thing I said before of writing inside and outside one's experience. But I think it is possible to imagine sex for other people and to place them in various situations that are stimulating and lovely to behold, yeah.
I have a feeling that this is your next book.
No.
How to Write Sex by Fiona Kidman. It could beat The Breed of Woman for sales figures, I think.
This is just an idea, Tracy. Shall we make it a joint, one of those?
We could.
Joint launch.
We absolutely could. There's a really great article actually called Mindfuck by Melissa Phoebos, and she says something very similar, that some of the sexiest writing contains no actual sex. It contains all of that wraparound detail that precedes or follows and makes it a sensual whole from the experience. So, yeah.
And that's what you do in the piece that you've just read before. That's very much what is there. There's a whole lot of sensory detail that is building up there to what's in the ear.
Oh, well, thank you. So one of the reasons that Barbara Kingsolver thought that writing sex could prove so difficult is that she said its language has been stolen from us by pornography, consumerism, and the medical profession. I really find, yes, all you doctors out there, I find myself that it's the language delights and the physical poetry of writing sex that's one of the most satisfying things about doing it. And there's a joy to stealing the language back and capturing its bodiliness in full sensory form, and using words that do really pulse with female desire. And so I'm wondering if you see your work as participating in any kind of reclamation of language around this area, female desire, queer desire, and if there are aspects of a dominant language around sex that you have ever felt moved to really resist and push back against.
Well, I don't want to go on at length. I think I actually have mentioned it in terms of the Mickey Spillane books that I read as a teenager. So there was some very ugly writing, and it was ugly in the sense, and maybe that's why perhaps mine is more attractive and appealing on the whole, because I don't like that. I don't like it. It's a sort of misogynistic kind of writing in which the woman is, a vessel for men's desires in a way that I find extremely unpleasant. And I know there is more contemporary writing of that nature, but I avoid it, so maybe I'm not the right person to comment on this.
No, I think that's an important view.
Yeah, I think it's not only a question of language, it's also a question of perspective. I think there have been things that I've found very, very difficult to read not so much because of the words that are used, but like the way that they are used, or the gaze that is present. And that's even, it's not just in fiction, that's even in like literary criticism. You know, sometimes when you read that stuff, and I think it was David Lodge who wrote something about the word doesn't come to us virgin. It's been used by all of these other, like, it was a very patriarchal kind of like take on writing as an act of doing sexual things to women. That's just very, very off-putting and very, very strange. So I think there's the words, but there's the overall framework that the words are operating within. In terms of the doctors, my day job at the moment is actually teaching anatomy and physiology. So like I find like medical terminology really the opposite of sexy. Like if your job involves like, here is a PowerPoint slide of a vulva, and this is a labia majora. Like it's just you wouldn't use words like that in a literary context. I think. I mean, some people do, but I think that's kind of the stuff of the Bad Sex Awards, or the very popular podcast My Dad Wrote a Porno. So the dad's porno is full of like words like cervix, or vaginal lids, or it's just the reason it's so hilarious is like the inappropriateness of the language. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there to get things really wrong, but there's also potential for exploring things from different angles.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I kind of tend to describe everything that happens in the world in the same tone. So not very sexy when it comes up. But I was just thinking about a day in my life where I ended up on Literotica on the Earth Day tag, because they had a competition to write the best erotic story around the theme of Earth Day. And that, I just really like the juxtaposition of like, I don't think I read any of the stories, I just read the titles, but they were all like, mother and son do gardening and more for Earth Day, or, like the boss asks everyone to help clean up the city for Earth Day and the team gets a little closer. And I really do like the idea of this like combination of not necessarily like mundane activity, but just kind of any activity just being juxtaposed against this like sexual thing, I think is, it was very, very entertaining for me. And I do believe that I still have all the screenshots on my phone where I'm trying to, usually when I get asked to like upload a author photo for something, I have to scroll through all these photos and I'm just seeing all this stuff that I've done, participated in intellectually, and yeah.
Great, thank you. Irene touched on that Bad Sex Writing Award. I don't know whether you're all aware of this, but there is an annual Bad Sex Writing Award that gets bestowed on some hapless author each year, and there's lots of throbbing and thrusting samples of dire sex writing uploaded to that particular page. Fiona kind of touched upon this, but I'm wondering if you all have any advice or language tips for writers when approaching this subject on how to avoid getting nominated for the Bad Sex Writing Award.
I guess if you're going to write about sex, I think you just need to examine your own value systems and stick to them, really. And once you go outside of them, I think you're straying into dangerous territory. So what you write, if it arises naturally in what's in your head and what's, I think that's the best approach. Don't try too hard to create something that's unreal. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really think I can give a lot of advice on that. Yeah,
I think you already gave a beautiful wealth of advice. Yeah.
I know that on my way into this this session, I encountered Guy Somerset, who said Ladies Chatterley's lover sets the scene for everything else to be, every other lot of sex writing for the rest of time to be better.
Lady Chatterley's lover.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we can do better, ladies.
Exactly.
No, not that I don't respect Lawrence, because I do, realise that at the time in which that book came out, and it met the, unbearable amount of scorn and banning, etc., that he was facing his own battles and, breaking barriers of a sort. But there's
agree.
still, I think, many, many female readers that feel that Lady Jane still has some things to say, while John Thomas got, quite a lot of limelight in that particular book. I'm wondering about, did you guys want to pick up on that question at all?
I think that I think that sometimes people, when they're writing sex scene, tend to put in way more detailed action than they do in kind of any other sort of thing. Like, I mean, like, you're not like, oh, the character woke up, they put their foot on the floor, and then their other foot, like, but then some, you're reading a sex scene and it's all insertion and etc. But I think, one time we had to feed back a sex scene that my friend had written, and by the end I was just like, did neither of them have arms? What's happening there?
Beautiful. We've only got 5 minutes to go, but just to close, I wondered if we could pick up maybe on what Fiona touched upon earlier about the aftermath of sexual exposure in your work and how it's been received by the audience and by critics. Do any of you have any classic stories or anecdotes or comments involving responses to the sexual content or themes in your work?
Well, as we're in closing times, I'll just say that I have been lumped in with at a particular time in my life with the Minstrel School of Poets. And maybe that's where I could probably let it go. Perhaps the audience have got some questions for us, do you think?
Well, do you guys want to make a brief comment before we could turn it over for a question?
Oh yeah. I've never had any sexual reactions to my work.
I don't think I've had that issue either.
You haven't felt. Well, it's actually wonderful to hear that. I think, because I still have a little bit in common with Fiona, that I was once asked very formally not to appear at an event that I had been recently put on the program for, because the Friends of the Library had read the book and discovered that it used the F word and there was sex appearing in it, and they didn't feel that it was suitable for their audience. And luckily, after that happened, I had, because the rationale that the Friends of the Library gave was that they had an older audience and that wouldn't find it appropriate. After that, though, I was mobbed by older women in the main street of my hometown saying, how dare they tell me that I can't listen to sex, So, yeah. But it's wonderful to hear that you haven't faced that kind of stigma. Do we have any questions in our last couple of minutes? Any burning issues?
Nice one, Ruth.
I think I thank you for sharing that. I might be left with a mental image that I don't know that I want to carry through the afternoon, but thank you, yeah. Anything else? Okay, well, I hope that you've all enjoyed the session, and I hope that the Founding Fathers didn't find too much to make them blink rapidly in the background. Thank you all so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to share the stage with you all, and I believe that all our books are out on the book table, and if you want signings, we can do that for you too. And thank you all for coming. And on a personal note, thank you so much to Featherston, the town, and the Booktown team. It's been an absolute amazing experience. It's a rare and beautiful thing to find a town dedicated to writing in Aotearoa. So we've just thoroughly enjoyed it, and you've made it a warm and wonderful experience. So thank you.
Say thank you to you, Tracy and Fiona and Irene and Rebecca. That was amusing, entertaining, insightful and provocative. And I think the patriarchy may well, having listened to that, be queuing up to talk to you about sex and buy your books, which is fantastic. We've got another book starting to happen now, which is Dame Fiona Kidman's Guide to Writing About Sex. Maybe you and Tracy are going to be working on that, and we look forward to launching that next year, perhaps, in the Middle-Aged Men Go Mild, which, as we say, Jordan will be a highlight. And I just want to also thank, this couldn't happen without our generous sponsors. So, Tess, thank you. Stand up, please. You sponsored this session. Congratulations on to.